Hey everyone, so I'm back again this week with another live Bible study. Someone last week asked me to share my thoughts and kind of do a Bible study on the woman at the well, so I figured I would go ahead and start that. I figured we could go through John 4. Not all of it because there is a whole lot in this passage, but probably I've kind of marked out the verses that I want to highlight. So it'll be 7 through 30 and then 39 through 42. And I have already actually marked this passage in my normal Bible, so I decided to go ahead and step out of my comfort zone and use my new interleaved version. So it's an ESV interleaved version, which means it is the same as the ESV journaling Bible. It just has a completely blank page in between every page, which is kind of cool and really handy for notes and stuff. I got it secondhand from someone on Facebook, but you can find them at Lifeway, or you can also find them online on Amazon or something like that. So, like I said with the other video that I posted, definitely pray before you start Bible studying. I've already prayed over this study and that we can get everything that we need to learn out of this passage. So I will be kind of cross-referencing the text, the blank text here with some of my notes and things that I've taken out from it before, just so that way, I can keep my train of thought a little bit better. There's actually a lot in this passage, and it's a really powerful one. So if you haven't really sat down and read it, I definitely recommend you do that either like now as we go through it or just on your own later, and definitely tell me what you think about it. So first off, I guess what I normally do is I just read the entire thing like chunk by chunk. So we're just going to go ahead and do that right now. So right now we're going to go ahead and read. We're probably going to do 3 verses at a time. So I'm going to mark verse 7 all the way to the end of verse 10. So we're going to read it, and then we're going to pull out initial thoughts. And for everyone joining, I saw someone say, what verse? So for everyone joining, it's going to be in John 4, and I will probably just write that at the top over here, so that way people can know and see. John 4. So just so that way it's John 4, and we're starting in verse 7. I'll try that too. Verses 7 through, 7 through 30. And also 39 through 42. Okay, so we're going to start by reading it, just these 3 verses, and then we'll make our initial connections. So it says, "A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no..." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So we're going to go over here to our initial thought bubble, which I'm going to just write right here. Initial thought bubble. Yeah, it's crooked. So for all of you who are like OCD or like things to be perfect, good luck trying to follow along with this, because I am definitely not OCD about anything anymore. So first off, I'm going to take note that the fact that she came to draw water, and she is a woman from Samaria. So just going to put out 2 little boxes right here. And we're going to note that she's a woman from Samaria. And so right off the bat, cultural context, if you didn't know, first of all, to be a woman in the society that they were living in, to be a woman was a really hard thing. Women were seen as less than men. They were seen as lesser citizens. So right off the bat, we see her worldly identity show through, because this is how she is identified. She is a woman, first off. And I think it's also good to like note the cultural context. So we're going to write cultural, context. And then we're going to do a little arrow down here. And then we're going to write out that a woman in that society was seen as less. And then also she was from Samaria. And again, cultural context, if you didn't know, the Jews did not interact at all with the Samaritans. We can see that again in another parable about the Good Samaritan, which I'm sure most people have read already, but if not, we can go over that some other time. The Jews did not want to interact with the Samaritans because they were like unclean, dirty, according to their like traditions and their way of thinking. So they weren't seeing the Samaritans as people, they were just seeing them as, I guess, lesser humans. So we also see another aspect of her worldly identity was that she was a Samaritan. And so we can also write cultural context. And we can write that Samaritans and Jews did not mix. And the Jews actually would go out of their way, so they would literally go around Samaria to avoid the Samaritans altogether. So I think it's fascinating personally to note that like right off the bat, like she's noted as a woman from Samaria. Like that's two things, like two societal like taboos that she is identified as. And to her, that's like who she is. And I guarantee you, like, she knew she was a woman. She knew she was a Samaritan. And I guarantee you that one way or another, that worldly identity had been pushed on her at some point in her life. Because, you know, in that society, you couldn't not know that you were a woman. And you couldn't not know that you were a Samaritan. So definitely from the start, we see a worldly identity showing. So we're going to move on to verse 8, and it says, for his disciples had gone away to buy food. So previous context, if you just like look up here, you can read about how they went to go get food, and he was left outside of the city. So he was sitting outside where this well was located, and this woman from Samaria, this double taboo person, came up to him. And so he asked her for a drink. And she was really surprised by this, and I kind of think that this relates to us today in the sense that, you know, when you talk to someone, when you speak to someone who doesn't expect you to, like if you say like, hello, or how are you doing to someone that, you know, is maybe a more of an outsider, someone who wouldn't be as like, you know, looked upon in society, if you say hi to them, like you don't know the kind of reaction like that's going to have, because they're probably going to be very taken aback, and you can automatically see the surprise. Because she literally says right out, how is it that you, a Jew, so we see Jesus's identity, his worldly identity, because he was a human, he also had an identity that was given to him by the world. So you can see that he was a man, a man, and a Jew. So we can see Jesus's identity to her from her worldly perspective. We can see that coming through as well. And so she explains her, like she expresses her surprise when she says, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? So again, we see her acknowledging that this is her worldly identity. This is who she sees herself as. She sees herself as a woman, a lesser citizen of the society. She sees herself as a Samaritan, someone who is, quote, dirty, unclean, less looked upon. So I'm just going to go ahead and tie these two things together. So Samaria to Samaria and woman to woman, just to kind of emphasize the fact that this is who she thinks she is. And again, even the Bible like gives you cultural context. Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So moving on to verse 10, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Sometimes I think like it's easy to assume that Jesus is being sassy in this passage. I remember when I read it the first time when I was pretty little, I was like, whoa, like he was being kind of like rude or harsh or saying like, if you knew, like, who are you? Like, and I think honestly, when I was younger, I used to think Jesus was like calling her dumb or something, but he's actually not. He's causing her to think, and he's asking her and telling her something that's going to cause her to do some serious soul searching in just a few moments. So one thing that I find interesting is the gift of God and who it is. So there are two things that this woman from Samaria, this double taboo person, needs to know. She needs to know the gift of God. So the gift of God, and she also needs to know who it is. So she needs to look past the worldly identities and the worldly things, and she needs to see the higher things, the gift of God. So something else interesting in this verse is going to be the part where it says, he would have given you living water. And Jesus later on kind of explains what this is to her, which I find is very interesting as well. So, moving on to verse 11, it says, the woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water?" She was confused, pretty perplexed by this situation, because here is this Jew, this Jewish man, and he is talking to her about drawing water from a well, and he doesn't have a bucket. And quite honestly, if I was this woman, I would be pretty confused too, and I might even be a little bit annoyed because, one, he just asked me for a drink of water, and two, he's talking about living water, and I'm just pulling up regular water, and he doesn't even have a bucket. So, she's pretty confused at this point, and to be honest, I would be too. And so she says, "Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." So, I think here is kind of the explanation for water and kind of what it symbolizes. We see a lot of the time in the Bible, water is used as a cleansing material, and of course still it is today, because you use water for a lot of things. You boil water to sanitize things, you wash your hands, you bathe in water. Water is still very much like a cleansing thing. And so Jesus talks about giving her living water. So he sees something that she needs and she doesn't know. He sees that she needs the living water and she might not be aware of that yet. So when she says, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" right there you can automatically see that she's thinking physical. He's thinking eternal. So when Jesus says, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again," he's basically saying, the water that you draw physically from this world isn't not going to last. I'm going to quickly grab my phone or grab my charger because my phone is dying and that's not cool. So, basically, what we have here is we have Jesus saying, the water that you get physically from this earth isn't going to last because there's something greater. And he's trying to explain to her as best he can, from his godly mind to her human mind, that there's something more than just physical. There's something that's going to last for eternity and always. So whenever he says, where'd it go? "Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again." That right there, that's eternal. So we're going to mark over here. I'm just going to write the verse because this is kind of normally, I don't do this like this way normally. I don't normally have a blank page over here that I can work with, so that's kind of cool. I'm going to mark what she says in verse 12 about our father Jacob. And I'm going to mark in verse where he says in verse 14, I'm just going to go ahead and mark that the water that I will give him. I'll just write the water that I will give. And we're going to go ahead and draw an arrow out from each. So this is the physical mentality. And then this is the eternal mentality. I'm going to grab my phone charger. I didn't grab it earlier. I thought I knew where it was, but I didn't. Okay. Actually, I'm going to see if I can plug it in my laptop. 1 second. Super inconvenient, but I should have charged my phone